All right, day 28 of the vlog, and number 4 in the primer for anti-racist white educators, joined once again by Lucas Mitchner, my man. All right, so we've covered the first 3. We talked about the first one, which was to listen to people of color and students of color. The second one was to learn, right? Is immerse yourself in as many sources as you can to learn about the issues without putting that labor on people of color. And then the third one was acknowledge, and credit to those who have done this work, which all of this is inspired by people of color. And so our fourth principle is
Follow. Goes hand in hand with some of the other ones, but if this one is intended to, if at all possible, put people of color in charge of the efforts for racial equity, to take guidance from those voices of color who have been doing the work, the anti-racist work for a long time.
Yeah, and this is, one that you can see as far as like positions of leadership and in education. It's very, very white, and when you look at who is in those positions of power and principalships and superintendent and all these different things, right? Like a lot of times those people aren't people of color because of the systemic disparities that exist in our systems. And so, what are you doing to reach out and find people that are doing this work, that have been leading this work, and taking that direction? Because sometimes it may be spending the money to get an outside consultant to come in and work with you or work with your school or work with your district. And sometimes it's, sometimes those people are already present, they just haven't been elevated to that position. So, whatever it may be, find the people that are doing this work, the people of color that are doing this work, and then follow their lead. Don't try to reinvent it yourself of what you think people want and what you think. The work's already being done. We just need to follow.
I think this also applies to how we engage with students on a day-to-day basis. Let them lead too. We can follow students' leads in this work. They're the ones experiencing school, and know that differently than we do, and have things to say about that experience, especially students of color. One example of that is a student organization that Terry and I hope to facilitate, but really students are the leaders there. We call it Bending the Arc. I think we're both pretty proud of it.
Yeah.
Some amazing kids do pretty incredible work in that student organization, but they do that work, and we just provide some supports for them when they need them. And I think that's something that's powerful. When it comes from the students and the staff can follow their lead, something that can go a long way.
And a lot of what goes into this, right, and the reason why it's so important to follow is trying to avoid the white savior complex, right? The idea of Michelle Pfeiffer going into the hood and, educating all these young kids of color. Like, that has been historically the way people view equity and education and racial equity. And it can't be about us. It can't be about what we're bringing to the table. It's got to come from the people most affected by this. And so, if you find yourself like constantly getting in, and this is like, we have to deal with this, right? Like we have to deal with the idea that we're put into positions of leadership to do this work, but how are you still making sure that that you're being led and that you are following the path of people of color and students of color that are wanting to see this done? So.
Yep. And one other point that's a bit of a challenge, and one that I haven't had to face yet personally, I don't know if I ever will, but it's sort of an interesting thing to think about, is when you're in a position where there's a choice to be made about who has a position of power, and you're one of the people who may be chosen for that position. Think about when you can step aside, and that sometimes has some pretty big consequences to you personally. But if it's about the work, maybe it's stepping aside from a position, right, from a job. Maybe it's allowing someone else a promotion where you might be up for that promotion too. Who knows? These are big questions, but I think important ones to at least consider in this discussion about following. People need to have positions available to them if we're going to follow them. And Terry's already mentioned this, but there's a huge deficit of teachers of color, administrators of color, and sometimes it will take white teachers and administrators to step aside and make way so that we can have more faculty of color to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something for me that it's a struggle because I'm definitely somebody that wants to get things done, and if I don't feel like it's being led, like I want to jump in and do it. But you got to balance that, right, and balance your own drive to get things done, because a lot of times that's centered in whiteness, right? It's around our ideas of when things need to happen and how they need to happen. So, just also be aware that sometimes following somebody else's lead is not going to look like how you would do it. And that's okay. And you need to be okay with that, and you need to experience that and allow that to happen. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for probably one of the most important principles. So stay tuned.
See ya.